This video will cover basics of environment layout, applying textures, and accessing assets from FAB. Okay, so let's take a look at getting started by building a new level and starting to lay things out in a way we might be able to use them for some type of PreVis or idea generation or just some content creation ideas here. So let's go ahead and make a new level. So this is the pre-existing one that I had just been messing around with a little bit. So in order to make a new level, I'm going to go to File, New Level, and then I have these couple options here. And I'm going to go ahead and just use the basic template right now and go ahead and hit Create. And it's going to ask me if I want to save all this stuff. And quite honestly, I'm going to say don't save because I don't need to save anything that I had in there. And now you can see what I have going on is a basic kind of flat environment. And this is good because what I want to do is I want to start from scratch and just kind of lay things out. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start laying out what could be kind of like an alleyway or something, right? So the storyboards that I'm going to work on, or the cinematic that I'm going to work on, or the idea that I'm going to previs is somebody in an alleyway kind of walking down, doing something, maybe looking at something in the alley. So I'm going to start off by creating some basic assets to include here. And I can do that if I look on the side here. I have my place actors. And one thing I do want to mention, if for some reason you're not seeing this particular layout, you can go into the Window tab, and then down here under Layout, you can go to Load Layout, and you can use the default editor layout or the Unreal Engine 4 Classic layout. And it takes a second to do that, but you can see this is the Unreal Engine Classic layout, which is very similar to what I just had open. So you have all these assets on the side. So what we're going to do, we're just going to really start by doing some really simple things just with the shapes. Okay, so here in the Shapes panel. We're going to grab a cube, drag that out and drop it. And the reason I'm doing this is just because this is just an easy way to kind of get in and start to explore and play around with this. So I'm going to kind of come in and create, again, remember Alt and left click and drag, and then middle mouse button click will move it. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to basically kind of lay something out that's going to look a little bit like an alleyway. W on the keyboard will get me my translation tools. Do a couple more things here. And we'll hold Alt, click and drag over, drag out a little bit, Alt, click and drag, creating kind of a little bit of a space in here. And again, I can come in here and play around a little bit with my design and my layout as I'm going. But I want to kind of create something that looks a little bit like this. And something like that, and that's good to start with, because what I want to do here now is I want to come in and I want to hit the little play button. And the reason I'm doing that is just so I can get a sense of what my character looks like in the space. And right now, these are huge buildings comparatively to the character that I have in here. And that's one of the reasons I like to use the third-person templates, because it's a really good way to kind of get a scale representation and kind of build around to do my layout really quickly in that method. And I'm going to leave it alone, actually. I'm fine with these buildings being as large as they are for this particular example. I'm going to build out a little bit more to these as well. So I'll kind of come in here and build a few more things on this. And I'll come back and I'm going to pause the video, but I'm going to lay out a little bit more to show you exactly what I'm talking about here. But just want it to look kind of like an alleyway. So I'll be back in just a little bit. Okay, so I've taken a few minutes here and I've laid out a little bit more of what this alleyway might look like. Just a little bit of scaling and things to see this a little bit more accurate to what this space might look like. And you can see I have a couple Cybertrucks back here that are just kind of hanging out just for reference of positioning and things like that. So right now I could start by going in now and start to break this down into shots, into compositions, into ideas of where things might need to go. But I can also start to add a little bit of oomph to my scene. So there are some things that I could do to this, such as applying textures. So right now, I just want to make a point here. So I'm using what are, these basic shapes that I have. There are different ways that we can actually access other types of building materials here on Unreal. One of the ways that I could do that is if I go into the modeling tab. There are a whole slew of tools and things that I can use in here. Now this gets a little advanced, so I don't want to go over that right now for this particular process. But if you want to start to explore this, there's a couple great tools, like the cube grid is a great way to build out an environment. It actually lays out a grid that you can then extrude from and build out spaces like that. And then these tool sets up here, like for example, the box, it would create a box to a certain set. So if I wanted to like increase the width or the depth or the height there, it'll create one based on the parameters that I set. And I can click in there and hit accept, and then I'm happy with that. Now the difference on this is that the UVs on these, which we're not going to get into too heavy here, but if I were to apply a texture to one of these cubes or blocks that I put in the background, the texture might look stretched or too big or too small, depending on what I'm doing with the scaling or size change on these. In these particular instances, that won't happen. So I'll actually leave that here to show you what I mean. So I'm creating this cube, and I'm going to go ahead and hit accept. And when I do that now, you'll see that I have a cube very similar to the other cubes that I had before. But if I were to apply textures, these will handle a little bit differently. And I'll come back in and show you guys that in just a second. But for right now, I'm going to just put in generated cube on there so I remember what that is. And then I'm going to hide it right now since I don't necessarily want to see it. So I can also, in my outliner here, as I'm going through, if I select something or I need to find something, I can select something in my viewport here, and then I can come over and see where that is here in my outliner. And the important thing here is that it gives you some details on that asset as well. So again, this is a little bit more advanced. I'm going to stick to using the shapes just for now because it's a little bit easier to get in and start using those. We're not doing a whole lot of modeling yet here in Unreal, but that is something that you could get into if you wanted to explore that a little bit more. There's a lot of documentation on the Unreal website that will give you more ins and outs on how to utilize some of the geometry options and the modeling options in the engine as well. So as we start to build out our environment a little bit more, again, using that simple geometry, we may want to also add in some elements to the scene to give it a little bit more life, or to give it a little bit more of a resemblance of what we might want our end scene to look like. And one of the ways we can do that is by using materials. So the way we can do that is we can actually use the Unreal Engine starter content. If you don't see this option here, if you go to all and then go to content and then right down here in the starter content, and again, that's going to be in the content browser. So if you don't see that, you can hit Control Space and that'll pop up, and then you can dock it in the layout. But you're going to look for the starter content. If you don't see that, you can go to Add and then go to Import, Add Feature or Content Pack, and then go to Contents, and it's right there. You click on it and add it, and then it'll just add that right in. So I'm going to go in though to the starter contents, and I'm going to look for some materials. So in here you have a little folder, it's called Materials, and I'm going to just simply use the M Basic Floor just for the ground plane. It's a nice gray that looks like perhaps what the floor of my alley would look like. And then I can also use something like a concrete tile for these other walls. Just drop these on. And I want you to notice, you see how huge the texture looks? So it looks like those are gigantic buildings. And then if I were to drop my character in and play it, you'll see it's like, well, it looks like concrete and that's great, but it's also gigantic. So one of the things though that we're going to have to do with this is we're going to actually have to contend with addressing or adjusting the size of our materials. Now, if you remember before, I had mentioned that if I was looking at the cube that I had using the modeling tools, if I go in and look at this and I take that that concrete tile and drop that on, you'll see it looks a little bit smaller, but the other thing is if I were to scale this up, it's going to still scale the material, but I can also then go in and address that after the fact. So I could go under into the modeling mode, and I could look at down here under the mower. I could go down to the UVs, and I could do like a UV unwrap, and then I can also I can come in and address and change some of the scaling and things on that. So I'm actually going to cancel that one. I'm going to go to the UV layouts here, and if I scroll down to here for scale, you can see I can scale that up or down, and it's actually already scaled to 5, so that's as small as that texture is going to look on there. But I can also do a couple other things if I wanted to, like move my texturing around. So the idea here is that I can actually come in and really kind of play around a bit with that UV and change the scale of my material there. So if I do that and hit accept, boom, it looks a little bit better than, say, this one, which is like really too big. Now, the other thing that we can do, because now if I do that and then I scale it again, you'll see that it's stretching and looking kind of funky. So there's another way we can do this, and if we go under the drop-down tab up here, I can go into, I'm sorry, actually if I go to this first, I can, this is my quick add, I can click on this little square plus icon, and if I come down to geometry, I can do a similar thing. I can grab the geometry and then grab a box. Oops, see if I can do that here. Geometry, box, there we go. And now it will actually allow me to, again, it's going to scale my material no matter what I do. But one thing I want to point out here is if I scale like that, you see how it really stretches it? One thing that I can do to kind of solve that problem a little bit here is I can actually go under the brush editing panel, select the top. So with the edit, I can select the top, hit W, and then I can pull this, and you'll see that it's actually not scaling the material. It's actually just scaling my box in the direction that I'd like it to go, and it's leaving the material as is and kind of like keeping it in proportion. So it's actually tiling that material as it goes. So the reason I'm bringing this up is because if you are at the position where you're like, I really want this to look good, and again, if this is more than just PreVis or just an idea of what the space is going to look like, and you want to actually texture out these assets that you're building, you will probably want to get into the habit of, oops, let me just go back to the selection. You'll probably want to get into the habit of starting to work with your materials a little bit more than just simply dragging and dropping them on. For this particular demonstration, I don't necessarily need that because I'm going to replace a lot of this stuff. I'm going to actually use real models later on. So right now, all I'm doing is I'm trying to get a sense of what this is going to look like. So I don't necessarily need to have all that really, really put together nicely. So in fact, I'm just going to drop on for these buckets, for these barrels. I'm just using the rust. If I can drop it, there you go. I'm just going to drop these on really quickly because I just want to get a sense of what this thing is going to look like. Maybe not fully designed out, but with enough idea of colors and materials that it gives me a sense of what the space is going to look like. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to go through and kind of lay out some additional materials on this. And then when I'm done, I'll come back and we'll start looking at the next idea, which is going to be getting some materials or getting some assets from something called FAB, the FAB marketplace. And we'll be able to utilize some of the assets from FAB inside of our space. Okay, so I'm back and I've added a few materials to my scene just to give me a little differentiation. I could go in even further and kind of explore the space a little bit, really get in here and get a sense of what I got going on. And I'm fine with this, again, because I'm just kind of figuring out what this space is going to look like and kind of where some of these assets are going to live. So what I want to do now is I actually want to use a few more tips and tricks here to get this place looking really, really solid. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the, down here in the content browser, I'm going to click on FAB. And what this is going to do, it's going to open up the interface that allows me to access free as well as pay materials or pay assets. So as an example, you can see here, industrial equipment, that's $2.99. Here I have some construction pile of gravel. I could use that and integrate that into my space. So there's all these different things that I have in here. I can also, if I was looking for some free stuff, I could come up here and just type free, and you'll see that it's going to load up with a bunch of content. And there's quite a bit that's available on FAB, 100% free. It's just there for the using. Now, you do want to look at all the different you know, if you're going to need to credit or how you need to download or what you need to utilize for that. But all of these elements are free, and you can just kind of search through a little bit. And here you have, look at this little pack of rocks that you could use. I'm going to try to find something, let's say, alley. And, well, I don't see any super good free alleys right now. But, oh, actually here, this is pretty decent. There's a little one there. It's a little data set, I think so. Graffiti for my alley, that could be kind of cool to use. So what you can do is, again, as you're starting to think about like the way you want to utilize these tools, is you could find some elements or some assets that you think would work for your space and go ahead and either, you know, pay for them through the FAB marketplace. You can find a lot of free to use assets online. You can, again, find a lot of free to use assets on FAB. And you can also start to model and build your own assets out, and that's totally your prerogative. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find and use a few elements from FAB. I'm going to download them, and I'm going to add them to my scene, and then we're going to build that scene out a little bit in the next video. But before I leave, what I'm going to do, I'm just going to grab one of these guys just so you can see the way that you do this. So I will grab... this actually looks nice, this little wasteland prop. So let's see if I can grab that. So right there, those look great. I'm going to go ahead and click, you know, add to project. Since it's free, there's a list of information. Read that. And once you read, you need to agree. I have read it before and I am reading it now, and I am agreeing to that. So go ahead and accept. And it's going to download that and drop it into my particular project that I have open. So what I'll do is I'll go through and I'll use some of these assets. I'll pepper them around. I'll design out a little bit more of a space, and then we'll go through that process in the next video.